Welcome to Inside the Numbers, the RockDaisy Sports Performance Podcast, where we decode the data, science, and stories powering elite athlete development. I'm Ron McKeefrey, and in every episode, I'll be diving deep with top strength conditioning coaches, sports scientists, and performance experts who are driving the game forward using tech, insight, and grit. Hey guys, welcome back to the Inside the Numbers podcast. I'm super excited to have a great friend of mine, Bryan Mann. Bryan and I have been doing this for about the same amount of time. And we've, obviously developed a great friendship, but also, so speak at the same conferences. We, every time we get together, it's like freaking long lost buddy, man. So appreciate you being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Ron. Yeah, it was that was incredible being back there in June. It was like we didn't miss a beat, or July, whenever that was. I can't remember.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about the conference over in England, which was fun, and man, it's just so great when you have good. Yeah, I say this all the time, but like if we all lived on the same street, we'd barbecue every night, and it's unfortunate that we only get a chance to kind of hang out at some of these events. But man, I truly value our friendship, and
Likewise.
Just not only the friendship, but also just the contribution to the field. And so I kind of want to dig into that a little bit. I mean, you've been at the forefront of this thing early on. I think you took a path that not a lot of strength coaches do, going more into the academics, but still being a practitioner, which I think is the key distinction. But let's talk a little bit about kind of how you've seen, in the course of our career, this field grow and evolve in the sports science arena.
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember back whenever it was pen and paper and session RPE was like the big thing. But it's a lot like just technology within science. We start out, and my students are tired of this example, but thankfully nobody has probably heard this, at least not from me. But, I always start out talking about how technology has changed and how that impacts science. So if you look at the microscope, it was invented by a guy named Van Leeuwenhoek, and he was able to look at cork in 4-time magnification. Well, here on campus at Texas A&M, I know that we have an electron microscope that allows us to look at that same piece of cork in a 4 billion time magnification. So even our understanding of cork is drastically different because of the result of technology. Well, now our technologies have changed immensely. And sometimes people aren't using the context with it, which is a shame. But, where we went from session RPE, well, now you can use inertial motion units, IMUs, with GPS, your catapults, your Connexons, which I think Connexon might use an LPS, and all these different devices to measure that. And, we started out with just heart rate and looking at time and zones. And then eventually they came into a Trump score. And now looking at how long does it take you to recover and all the different aspects of heart rate that we can use. And holy buckets, man, force plates. Man, I remember when those suckers were $25,000 per, but they were only multi-axis. And now they've utilized single axis force plates that for anybody under 6'7", they're pretty good for anything with jumps and stuff like that. And there's not, too many people that they aren't good for. I just kind of wonder, we're not going into that right now because that's that I could talk for an hour on this aspect of it. But those things have become so much more accessible, and it allows us to look at things beyond just jump height, where coaches used to just look at jump height by jumping up and, the old chalk and go up and do it on the wall. I mean, that's how I had to do it. But then again, remember, I'm, a redneck from backwoods Oklahoma. So we had to do things with baling wire and duct tape and WD-40. Yeah, so then, it has just completely changed. Now we can look at the evolution of the athlete, how they change. They might have the exact same jump height, but what if they put on 30 more pounds? Well, we could see how their forces, the velocities, the powers, is this stuff actually going to be utilizable whenever we go into a sport? And then if we're looking at sprinting, it's not, there was stopwatches and then timing gates, and now holy buckets, we got sprint lasers and contact, what is that called? I think it's called a contact grid, where you could actually look at the left-right foot contacts and look at the velocities and the differences as you go through the phases. And dude, cameras, holy cow, just using iPhones and using stuff like OpenCap. Now we have markerless motion capture that is able to be used by anybody. Now you got to know how to code to be able to get some data from it. But, as far as the collection goes, any strength coach, as long as they can print out a checkerboard and they have 3 cameras, 3 iPhones or iPads, they have got a complete motion analysis lab. These things didn't exist whenever we started, Ron.
Right.
I mean, these were my dreams of where I thought it would go. Now we are going to have to, and now with the utilization of AI, it's going to allow us to go further down to the individualization of training because it's going to do a lot of the things that with my job at Missouri, combing through the data and seeing are there anomalies here? Is there anybody that we really need to look at to do something different with, and how we progress through our level system? Well, now AI is going to be able to do that for you and allow for greater individualizations of programming. Just look at like VBT, that's something I'm well known for. And when it started, and let's go all the way back to the 1960s. Right. It basically started as an Abalakov device with a stopwatch. Right. And the Abalakov device was you basically take the measuring tape, like a tailor's measuring tape, but you make it a lot longer. And they would put a zero where you had this freaking belt with a tape measure to it. They would just look at where it was at the ground, and then you would jump up in the air, and then they would look at that distance, and that's what it was. And then they added a stopwatch onto it for how long it went out, and well, that's distance and time. What does that give you? Velocity. Well, then the Tendo came around, and then it's just, basically a new derivation of that a little bit more. But what a lot of people don't realize, and maybe this should be a throwback Thursday for me that I had to come out with, but
About to say.
it only does. Yeah, shoot. Well, let's clip it and save me the work, right? No, I'll redo it on my own. But it gave you meters per second and feet per second, and it gave you watts and joules, and now that was it, right? You couldn't change exercise, but you couldn't change the filter unless you had like a PhD in nuclear engineering. And now you just push what exercise it is, and it has the terminal velocity for it. It will have loads following the individual and be able to look and see what normalized power and where it occurred at for the person and normalize and create a individual load velocity profile that you can check back on and do these things that I was having to do by hand and by Excel once I got smarter and realized that would work. So the amount for individualization as far as that goes is incredible. The technology increases that we have seen just in our lifetime. I can't wait to see what's next. I just can't.
I agree.
The things are incredible, and some of the stuff that people are developing here just at Texas A&M. It's like it was they're making Rocky forward and everything that the Russians were doing, being able to be done on your cell phone, man.
That's right.
This is nuts.
Yeah. That's a good segue into kind of where I wanted to go, because I think like you and I we remember when a computer lab was put into our colleges, right? Like,
yeah. Dude, I remember my first email and you could only use it on campus. You couldn't use it anywhere else.
During college.
Yeah. My freshman year in college.
I tell that story all the time. I wrote letters instead of emails, and whenever I had an email address, it was kind of this new column that I was putting in. That was kind of weird, but I think it's a good distinction right now, or because I think a lot of people, they just chalk up technology to sports science. And I know for me, as somebody that got a bachelor's in biology and then another bachelor's in exercise science, and then went on and got my master's and my PhD and all those things, like I've always considered myself a scientist. Like I've always considered, it's the scientific method in the weight room, right? So sports science, I think is one thing. Now, how do you, technology is another. I think too many people rely on the technology piece without really fully understanding the science.
Yeah.
And I think,
100%.
What would you say, I guess my question is how do we prevent becoming too reliant on the technology, or prevent, or now AI? Cause pretty soon it's going to be a blood prick and you're going to be able to print out the perfect workout, right?
Yeah.
The perfect meal plan. But how do we prevent from becoming too reliant on those things?
Man, I think one of it is going to be that you just have to understand, you have to learn the science of the stuff first before you start implementing the technology. Because if you don't understand the science of adaptation and how that occurs and what should be occurring, you are just going to be struck by everything. So I start all my class with the basics. And I talk about like, hey, here are the major ways that we increase force. Here's the adaptations that increase speed, and here's the adaptations that increase elasticity. Here are the trainings that we do to that. Here are the technologies that we can use to evaluate that. So figure out from understanding these aspects, what is the low hanging fruit? Too often, I think everybody is just wanting to know, oh my gosh, I got to know this technology. Oh, I've got to have the newest VBT device. I've got to have the newest force plate. No, you need to know what all the stuff means before you start just throwing stuff out there. Otherwise, you're doing what I would call sports tech and not sports science. You're not investigating and finding answers. You're just doing a lot of data collection to make everybody feel like a lab rat. And you're not doing a decision with it. The only thing it is recruiting. That, hey, we've got this. Well, if you've got something, but you don't do anything with it, it's useless. You got $125,000 money pit is what you have. And I think it's
Yeah.
stupid.
Well, I think that's, I couldn't agree with that more, where the interpretation of the tech is the sports science. It's not, you're not doing sports science if you just throw some numbers up on a screen and have a leaderboard and there. And I think, one of the biggest challenges I think that we're facing moving forward is, all these different technology companies, they're popping up left and right, and a lot of them are great, but some of them are just trying to make a dime, and able to really dig into the reliability and validity of these devices, I think is one of the most challenging things. And I think a lot of coaches will say, it doesn't matter as long as I compare that data at the beginning to that data at the end from the same device, then at least I've got a measure. But talk a little bit about how coaches, people that are wanting to implement some of these tech pieces into their programs, how should they go about checking the validity and reliability and really understanding what they're putting in their room?
Well, one of the first things that they should do is go on Google Scholar, PubMed, whatever. Everybody's got access to Google Scholar. And to be honest with you, that's where I go for the first anyway. And then I'll use one of the other search engines to be able to get the access to the article if it's not an open source. So you should look and see, what is the reliability of this device? What is the error rate of this device? The people that are saying, well, it doesn't matter, it all comes out in the wash. It's like, yeah, but if your error rate's 15%, right? Well, that's like 7 repetitions. At least one of them's going to be off, right? And if that one repetition is 15% higher, 20% higher, and it was an error, you don't know that. So 15 and 20% error, that's crap. I mean, that is like using a carnival game. So, you want to make sure that you're using a good device, because your results are only going to be as good as the technology that you put into to start with. So, it's like, well, did he actually jump 34 inches or did he jump 31 inches? Well, actually, if that's 20%, well, that would be 28, right? So did he jump 28 inches or 40? Because we got to go the other way. That's a 12-inch swing. Dude, no, let's make sure that we have a good device. I wish I was just spitballing and throwing out numbers on this 15 to 20%, but no, you can look at the literature and you can see stuff like that, and that they have poor variance. So you want your variance to be small so that you have good reliability. And then where some of the people are saying like, it's the same thing. Well, no, it needs to be valid and reliable. And to me, I'll take reliability over maybe, it's like, well, it lacks some validity. Okay. If I can justify it, though, I'm going to use it. So one of the things to do would be to take all your good athletes and just have them be measured on this device, right? The people that are super consistent, say your juniors and seniors, let's say it's a VBT device, and you are sitting there watching it and you have instructed everybody to do 10 reps with 60%, and you're doing max intended velocity. So compensatory acceleration training, dynamic effort, whatever name you want to choose to put it on. Whenever you get down to it, it's all the same stuff. Just everybody's got to have their flavor. And then look at what's called the coefficient of variation. So if you have your really good athletes and they have a low coefficient of variation, you know that this device is probably going to be reliable enough for you to use. But if it is wild and all over the place, don't use it. Now, that's why I'm saying don't give it to freshmen. and have them do it because the freshman's movement efficiency is crap. So you want to have it also on a simple movement that is very, very repeatable, that they can do it the same way every time. And if it's good that way, you got a good device. But if it's all over the place, that's like trying to use the circus strength tester, which, yeah, everybody knows it's all about the location. It's not about how hard you hit the dang thing. I busted a couple of those suckers in my day back whenever I was still lifting, benching well over 7 and squatting up in the 9s to thousands.
Right.
I broke those things, but it was saying I was a weakling. It's like, well, yeah, you might say I'm weak, but you're broke. So who won that one? But that's what you've got to do, is you've got to do your own homework. And if you just Google how to determine reliability with a device, you're going to have step-by-step instructions that are listed out there. And there's a good chance, I don't know this for sure, but there's a good chance that there's going to be an R package or something that somebody has already worked up in Excel that you can just copy and paste it into. Or you input this package into R and you tell it where the data is and run it. It's got to be set up a certain way because that's how the person set it up to begin with. It's a computer program. It's got to run in a certain fashion, but it's nails. And I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I think anytime you're making decisions that with an error of 12, 15, 20%, that's the biggest issue you have, I think, implementing sports science into your program, because it is an emerging field or emerging acceptability, I guess, by coaches. But 20%, I mean, I don't want to put my career on a 20% error of whether or not a guy should play or not, or practice or not, or.
And to be clear, that device, I'm not going to name the device or anything, but that device is no longer on the market.
Yeah.
So I think some people figured it out and went the other way, but you got to do your homework.
Well, I think what you said there is, I think it's the most important thing, is that you have to ask questions. You have to ask questions and you have to be curious. And I think that's the number one thing why you and I have been able to navigate this field for so long, is that we ask questions. And because we ask those questions, we stay current with whatever's out there, right now, but there's a general understanding, and you know it far better than I do. But when, if you were, obviously most of your role is, I can't remember the exact title at Texas A&M, but
I don't remember,
or whatever,
Yeah.
Head honcho at Texas A&M Sports Science, or strength and conditioning
for academics, not for athletics, yeah.
But if you were working back at Missouri in the weight room every single day, and that was your role, what would be the technology that you would incorporate in the sports science thereafter? To evaluate players and make those types of decisions.
Well, I would have a couple of different levels to it. So what I would do is here's how I look at sports science, and this is what I think it should be, but I'm not saying that I'm right. Okay. I think of it like body, BMI and body composition. Now, BMI, we know for the BMI for the athletic population is absolute crap, right? Because if a dude weighs 300 pounds at 6 foot and he has a six pack, it's going to tell him he's morbidly obese. Right. But the dude's got 10% body fat. So we know that's crap. But in the general population, it works very, very well. If I go down in Northgate is a, kind of like a bar party district and stuff, but they got some restaurants too. And if I go to lunch over at Northgate, I see a bunch of people weighing 300 pounds at 6 foot, they ain't ripped, right? So then it would be good for them. It's a quick catch-all. So what I see is that what I would do now, if I went back, is that I would have just a testing battery that's a quick catch-all. We would do counter movement jumps, drop jumps, mid-thigh pulls, force velocity profiles on any exercise that was tested. If we could do a sprint laser, a change of direction test, maybe with an IMU or something that, I don't have a real good way to look at the change of direction test yet. I'm still thinking, working, talking. I got some ideas, but I'm going to leave it alone because, dude, every time I open my mouth and I'm wrong, everybody loves to rub my nose in it. So, I'm going to keep that shut right now. And then a standing long jump. I'd like to do that on a triaxial force plate as well. And functional movement screen. And I think that pretty much clears it from my regular testing battery. Now, if somebody flags in that, we can use all the stuff with single axis plates, cameras, multi-axis plate is needed for the standing long jump. We don't need markered motion capture. Shoot, we probably don't even need markerless motion capture except for on the drop jump. right? Why on the drop jump? Well, because it's also a screening for an ACL tear. So why wouldn't we? Let's layer this as much as we can. And then if somebody flags that they need more attention, or maybe they're coming back from surgery, then we would have a more kitted out lab, or we would have a relationship with somebody in a kinesiology, exercise physiology that's got a marker motion capture lab with all that stuff. And then we could go in deep dive into the stuff that we need to look at. But 97% of the athletes are going to be fine. Yeah. It's that 3% that we need to look at. And if I, know somebody's a stud and they're coming back from something, well, I'm just going to, let's say whenever we were at Missouri, we had a running back that had a catastrophic knee injury with a patella, ACL, PCL, maybe MCL and LCL too. It was one of the it's probably the third ugliest knee injury that I've seen live or on TV, Yeah, dude. So I would, with him, somebody like that, no, I would absolutely throw them in that full get up from jump. But I would have my sports science be a quick catch-all and then see what aspects do we need. It's like, okay, this dude is poor on his 10-meter time, but he is great on his 40. What's wrong? So let's go look and let's see how we can improve their performance in that specifically, using the scientific method and some basic tools, and then deep diving if we need to. You're not going to need a deep dive that much, though.
I agree with all that 100%. I guess my follow-up question would be, do you see any value in the traditional combine test when it comes to football specifically? As far as
I do and I don't.
So that's one question that I wrestle with. So I'm curious to get your take on it.
Well, so here's the deal: is that most of the time, the combine test just tell us, is it enough? Are they fast enough? Can they jump high enough? And some of it we can use. And I wouldn't say it's good for necessarily the combine, but it would be good for like high school recruitment. I mentioned this to our football GM and head of recruiting that, whenever we put out that paper on momentum and how things changed, I'm like, look, this is easy. If you got a body weight and you got a 40 time, well, we know the distance is 40 yards or 36.6 meters. So how about we just divide distance and time? So 36.6 divided by their time, that gives us the velocity and multiply by mass. Like, okay, well, why would we do that? Well, then if these kids on film, especially these small town kids, are they actually good? What do you mean, are they actually good? Well, can they move? So if they have a high momentum, they're big and they can move. And the people that you're seeing get knocked around on film isn't just because the other people are small and they're ragdolling them. It's because this guy's a dude. And if he looks like that on film and he's got a poor momentum, he's probably just the fat guy that leaned on somebody and they fell over as a result. So, here's some of those. Man, I forgot what you even asked and I started going down that rabbit hole, man. Call me Buddy Morris or something.
Test, just to
the combine test.
Yeah.
So, and then we're publishing a study. I've been submitted it. I don't know. No, we're still working on it. So I guess I shouldn't really talk about it, but screw it. There's a lot of these things that there's no difference between those who got drafted and those who didn't. So then it's kind of like, well, what's the importance here? Whenever you look at linear mixed modeling approaches, it kind of loses some of the fidelities. So to say that at the elite level, talent identification, it's not that great, but through repeated measures, we know if somebody is more powerful, faster, change direction better. That's all we know. We don't know if they're a better athlete. We don't know if they're a better football player. We just know that they do better on these tests. And the improvement in the test doesn't seem, I got to be careful there because we're going to be going through the longitudinal data set that I've got next to see if the improvement on some of these tests does lead to improvements in playing time. I don't think that it did because we've got a paper that I'm publishing with Jonathan Weekly down at ACU in Melbourne, Australia, where we look at diminishing returns. You keep improving in strength, but you see lesser and lesser improvements in speed, change of direction, power, et cetera, year to year to year, just to kind of show that, hey, we got to change things up sometimes, right? Yeah. So, I think that those tests, it's not great for football. It's not great for talent identification, but it does help to match up. Are they seeing what they think they're seeing? Does this tail of the tape hold true, or is this just an anomaly, right? That this guy just happened to go against crap competition. So let's face it, if we go into a bunch of small towns, whenever I was in Missouri, we found some gems in those small towns. But we also found some guys that came out and they looked amazing on film. And I'm like, are you sure that this is the guy that you saw? Because I ain't seeing it. And but I think that that's one of the areas that we could use the combine test to help with some of that. But saying that it's great for football, we needed some football skills in there.
Right.
If it were how hard, how fast can I push this sled 5 yards that's loaded up at 300 pounds? Yes. If it was, sprint impact force or how quickly you can react to this stimulus that's going to be popped out, those are amazing. But a lot of the stuff, like, dude, what's that? What is one of the names for the 5-10-5, also called short shuttle? What's another name for it? Pro agility test. And that name does not reflect what that test is.
Great.
It's the pro change of direction test.
That's right.
There is no changing direction there is no reactiveness. And the reactiveness, the ability to make those changes based on the stimulus you see, that's sport. And we're not testing it.
Yeah, I think the reason I asked the question, because I think, there's very few people, if not all, that that would agree with changing the combine. I think there's so many people that would. I think the message that prevents that from happening is the commercialization of it and being able to compare the latest DB versus Deion Sanders or, whoever else. Right. And I guess, how would you go about kind of keeping that history and being able to maybe correlate that, compare that, to keep that in? Because I think the other issue that you're running into is, like, kids aren't they're not doing it anymore. They don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So there has to be something to change for that to continue to happen, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that they would be able to do is do the historic tests, do the new tests, and do the new tests, have an ability to predict who's going to play. That's the only way that we're going to be able to do it, is have just a new series of tests and find out if they work. I'm not saying to stop the old ones. Right? This is the NFL Combine. Of course, what's his name's got to hop down and do the 40 every year after everybody else is gone. There's too much money involved. I don't see it changing because, the almighty dollar drives everything. It's the golden rule. And unfortunately, we're in the 21st century, not the 19th, 18th, or even 20th. Now the golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rules. And it's not going to change. Now, I think we could add things in, potentially, especially if enough of the teams thought, hey, this test is great, but I don't see that. I mean, that's about the only way that that's going to happen. I don't see another way unless somebody at the NFL Network came up with a test. So, if anybody knows the NFL Network and then they've got combine stuff and they're looking for a consultant to change those things, give them my number and email. I'd be more than happy. I've done some stuff helping some people with the NHL combine for bench press, Mike Patento way back in the day. And it was just a conversation. I'm not saying I'm the guy that's going to change anything, but damn, let's just talk. I mean, there's a few of us out there. I can't think of too many people that have got a PhD and they also were a strength and conditioning coach at a Division I institution. Then now they're an academic who's published. So let's get those types of people. Let's get those in that room, because those are the people who know what's going on. I'm not saying I got the answers,
right,
but I'm saying I'm going to ask some good questions.
Yeah, I agree, man. Well, we end the show here. Just a couple quick questions. I guess the big thing right now is I know the answer to this because we've had this conversation. You making the switch to Texas A&M. Oh, you did that intentionally for what you see in that program. What are some of the things that you're excited about how you guys are approaching developing this next wave of sports scientists?
Man, I have never been so supported in my life, in my career. Now I'm working with Bo Sandoval and Brian Crutcher. So now we're not a one-man show, we're a three-man show and expanding. We are working together to set the foundation. And this is not the first time I've built something. And so I've got experience doing that. And I am so excited that we've got the people on board that are doing that. So, my thing is, you give me 5 years and we're going to be the top strength and conditioning program that's out there. Bo and myself are two people who were forged in the flame of the industry. So this isn't like you look at, I encourage people to look at their professors and what they've done. Okay. And if you've got a professor who's teaching you a profession that they learned from a book, I would go the other way. I want somebody who's been in the field, but that's just me, right? And I'm not saying that there's not a lot of smart people that can't learn from reading. I completely understand that. And there absolutely are. but they cannot tell you what it feels like to have a 345-pound defensive tackle telling you to go F yourself because they don't feel like doing it that day. I know how that is. And I can tell you how I responded and let you make some decisions on how you would want to respond in the future.
Right.
Not everybody else can do that. So I'm really excited for the personnel that we have here. And it is an opportunity to do something that I hope outlasts me. And hopefully we can leave a lasting legacy here on education. Crutcher and Sandoval are amazingly intelligent people and great people. So I can't wait to see what we would come up with. I've got a 5-year plan. I don't want to, throw it out there because people are going to say, oh, no way, he's just talking smack. Man, yeah, well, check my receipts. I don't just talk smack, but I'm going to keep pushing forward. I'm going to keep pushing the field in any way that I can.
I know you will, buddy. I think what you said earlier about, the guy that could help change the guy that I feel confident in educating the next wave of sports scientists, strength coaches, performance specialists, the whole deal. I mean, you're at the top of that list.
Thank you. I appreciate
all you do. Appreciate the friendship and really glad that you came on the show, man.
Oh, thank you.